apologize for being late. Busy week, Zooms back to back, but here we are. Here we are to finish up the final two chapters of Acts, and I'll remind everyone we're going to get together in a few weeks from now to kind of discuss what some of our impressions, what's happened over. It's been a year of study, more or less, and I'll just say that personally, I found it a little anticlimactic. Maybe that's something that those that have studied Acts over the years have found as well. I don't know, but we'll find out. And Steve, just to bring people up to speed, I don't think we've met since. Have we met since Passover? I guess maybe we did. This week was Israel Independence Day. It's a difficult time for many of us, and I just got off a call with a number of other rabbis and some representative of a very encouraging Palestinian Jewish group called Standing Together in Israel, who are very much the backbone of these demonstrations all over Israel today. And at the same time, we just got a text message that the right wing had its own demonstration, far less people involved, but still pretty strong in Jerusalem. So I'll be seeing that. Sasha and I will be seeing that firsthand with our visit to Israel in a few weeks. Are we meeting next week, or is it after? I think it's afterwards, right? Anybody remember the date?
Let's see, David. I'm gonna look it up real quick on my.
It's May 4th.
Oh, it is. Oh, it's next week.
Or
then.
May
Okay.
the 4th.
Yeah. That's
okay.
what I have.
Thank you, Manda. Okay, so that we'll still see each other before we go to Israel. But that's kind of on my mind right now. And but I'll ask Steve, as usual, to kind of bring us up to speed as far as the context of where we are in the arc of the story of Paul and Acts of the Apostles.
Well, it's a dramatic and yet, as you say, slightly underwhelming finish. It's almost as if, hey, I got to get this thing done. Let's wind it up. And so yes, after all the trials and the accusations and the going through all the legal channels and protocols, and Paul has languished in Caesarea Maritima on the coast, the large Roman city that Herod had helped create. Finally, he's set free to go on to Rome because he had made the appeal to the emperor. And even though Luke wants to make the case that Paul is innocent, they find no fault in him. They could have let him go had he not appealed to the emperor. Now we've got to send him off to Rome. And so now we're given this kind of a Homeric Odyssean saga of a sea adventure. And along the way, we'll see how Luke wants us to perceive Paul in the narrative. And then we'll hopefully have some time to reflect on how it ends and that final statement that is made that's a bit provocative.
Great. So, George, would you like to honor us by reading the first section for us?
What is the first section?
27:1. We usually send out a text sheet, but you can read.
Oh, yeah. But where do you want me to stop?
I just the first. Usually, the way the paragraphs are laid out, we find those are edible bites.
All right. When it was decided that we were to sail for Italy, they transferred Paul and some other prisoners to a centurion of the Augustan court named Julius. Embarking on a ship of Adriamitium, that was about to set sail to the ports along the coast of Asia, we put to sea accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and allowed him to go to his friends to be cared for. Putting out to sea from there, we sailed under the lee of Cyprus because the winds were against us. After we had sailed across the sea that is off Cilicia and Pamphylia, we came to Myra in Lycia. There, the centurion found an Alexandrian ship bound for Italy and put us on board. We sailed slowly for a number of days and arrived with difficulty off Cnidus, and as the wind was against us, we sailed under the lee of Crete off Salamone, sailing past with difficulty. We came to a place called Fair Havens near the city of Lycia.
Okay, and we would have done well perhaps to have a map. On the other hand, I think we would have gotten lost in the details. Not only the geographical details, I think, in this section, but also the nautical terms that are used, unless there are sailors here who can help us out a bit. What's clear to me from this section and the sections going forward as well is that there's great detail that this sounds like a personal account, right? This is one of those passages that are interesting in the Acts of the Apostles that perhaps reflect an older document or a particular document, a first person telling the story. But what are some of the impressions or questions that you folks have from this first section?
As we're dealing with metaphors here, nature's against them the whole way, and it gets worse from here. There, one might infer Paul is going to Rome, and everything's against him, but he's going nevertheless. It shows his resolve.
Mm-hmm.
And he becomes the cool head on the ship when there's plenty of opportunities for him not to go, but he's determined to get there.
And in this first paragraph that you just read, I'm taken just by the details and
Yep.
the geographical precision, and then this parenthetical thought that Julius treated Paul kindly in Sidon, or how do you pronounce that, David?
In Hebrew, it would be Sidon.
Sidon. Is that north of Akka?
Yeah, Akko is just north of what today's Haifa.
Right.
Then comes Tsur or Tyre, and then Sidon or Sidon.
Oh, for Phoenician country, right?
Yeah.
So, the fact that he, the first detail was they were accompanied by Aristarchus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica, makes you wonder if that's one of the members of the community that Paul, when he founded the koinonia, the gathering of Jewish Christians in Thessalonica, if just that geographical, biographical detail gives it the feeling of a real story, a real narrative that's unfolding here.
Yeah. Okay. Rita Clary, you want to read verse 9?
Since much time had been lost and sailing was now dangerous, because even the fast had already gone by, Paul advised them, saying, "Men, I can see that the voyage will be with danger and much heavy loss, not only of the cargo and the ship, but also of our lives." But the centurion paid more attention to the pilot and to the owner of the ship than to what Paul said. Since the harbor was not suitable for spending the winter, the majority was in favor of putting to sea from there on the chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, where they could spend the winter. It was a harbor of Crete facing southwest and northwest.
So we see that even then people would go to Phoenix to spend the winter. This Phoenix, which people don't seem to know where exactly it is here, although the similarity between Phoenician and Phoenix also may certainly come in here.
What is at the western end of Crete, and the last chance to stop before going across a very broad stretch of the Mediterranean, which is unprotected.
Mhm. Right.
What does it mean when it says even the fast had already gone by?
So the fast is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. And that is a common way of referring to it, in fact, or the day or the fast. The tractate in the Talmud that deals with the laws of Yom Kippur, with all the sacrifices that the Kohen and the things that were done post destruction of the temple as well, to commemorate or honor, commemorate, or keep the day. That tractate, its name is the day in Aramaic, Yoma. So that's why it's capitalized here, the fast. Yeah. It's not the first time that Luke or the author is referring to the passage of time with holidays, with Jewish holidays. We had both Pesach, Passover, and its other name in a different place, the Chag HaMatzot, the holiday of unleavened bread, or the day of the festival of unleavened bread. We had Shavuot, Pentecost. So to my mind, this is one of those markers that's still saying we're still Jewish. We're still very, very Jewish. That's
Well, and I was seeing it as, they talk about sailing was dangerous. I looked at it as maybe a calendar thing,
Yeah, it definitely is. But instead of saying September 12th or
Right.
mid-September or fall, beginning of fall, marking it by then, yeah, it's absolutely what you say. That's absolutely correct. That's to say that it is dangerous now. Yeah, as the rest, yeah.
I have to ask a question out of profound ignorance. This is a difficult journey to start with, all things being fine. The Jews, I gather, are not particularly eager sailors. They tend to stay close to the shore. So here they are out there. Is there anything particularly unadvantageous about sailing at the particular time that they're sailing? I mean, religiously speaking?
Yeah, is it for instance unauspicious, as they would say
Yes.
in religious language? Yeah, no, I don't think so. In the beginning, I thought maybe that has something to do with it. Also, I thought maybe this was connected to the lack of eating that's going to come later on. In the end, I don't think they're really connected. No, not that I know of. There is an inauspicious time in Judaism, in the Jewish calendar, and that's around the 9th of Av, which is the anniversary or the day that commemorates both the destruction of the first temple in 586 and the second temple in 70. Now, this, of course, I don't know from what point it became the inauspicious date that it is. It's also the day that according to late rabbinic tradition, it's when the Israelites accepted the view of the 10 spies as opposed to the 2 spies, and were punished by God to wander in the desert for 40 years. It's a collection, it's a date that collects. So that time of year in the summer is considered, at least in rabbinic thought, and that's post New Testament, I don't know the time of the New Testament, as being inauspicious, but this isn't one of them. As far as Jewish sailors, we do have stories of rabbis in the Talmud that did sail to Rome. There is some talk of it. There's some parable. There's a wonderful parable that I was reminded of because I saw in the Greek text that the word for port is limna, I think, like this, the word we get liminal from, and the word in Aramaic for port is leiman, which is directly from the Greek. And there's this lovely parable about when somebody's born, when somebody dies, that uses that word. So they were familiar with the sea. But as far as staying close to the shore, that's kind of what most sailors did in those days, right?
Well, the
They're-
Phoenicians tend to go across the Mediterranean, but they're legendary sailors.
Yeah, I think that most sail and the description we have here is this constant going and docking. There's, it's not like Queen Mary. Yeah.
But we do know that there were regular trips from North Africa to Rome, with the grain trade. And in fact, in that first paragraph, there the centurion found an Alexandrian ship bound for Italy. And so they
Yes, but
found
I don't think
passage.
they went in a direct line, though. I don't think I think they were all, my impression is that they were always hugging the coast. I don't know if that's the right word, but they're sailing up the coast to stop on a regular basis as opposed to a direct shoot.
Well, it's
Yeah.
probably a milk run.
I don't know what that means.
Well, they're stopping to drop off cargo here and pick up cargo from there, and hopefully profiting by each departure. I mean, it's the nature of shipping. You take something to somewhere and pick up something from somewhere else and take it somewhere else.
Okay, anything else in this paragraph? Okay, then. So, Jim, you want to read 13 for us?
When a moderate south wind began to blow, they thought they could achieve their purpose. So they weighed anchor and began to sail past Crete, close to the shore. But soon a violent wind, called the nor'easter, rushed down from Crete. Since the ship was caught and could not be turned head on into the wind, we gave way to it and were driven by the running under the lee of a small island called Claudia. We were scarcely able to get the ship's boat under control. After hoisting it up, they took measures to undergird the ship. Then, fearing that they would run on the Syrtis, they lowered the sea anchor and so were driven. We were being pounded by the storm so violently that on the next day, they began to throw the cargo overboard. And on the third day, with their own hands, they threw the ship's tackle overboard. So when neither sun nor stars appeared for many days, in no small tempest raged, all hope of our being saved was at last abandoned.
Impressions, questions, reminiscences. Right, Sasha's in the other side of the room says, of course, Yonah, right? You mentioned before Odyssean. Yeah, there's a lot of Odyssey, a lot of Homer here as well, but it feels to me in this paragraph, this is almost right out of the book of, it's totally directly inspired from the book of Jonah. Would you not say so, Steve?
Well, and didn't Jonah leave from Jaffa?
Yeah,
And
Jaffa.
went, so was headed for he was going the opposite direction. Where
Right, he was supposed to go to Nineveh, which is Mesopotamia. Instead, he
Yeah.
went in the opposite direction, and
He was headed for Spain.
Yeah, to Tarshish. We don't. There's a lot of discussion. Nobody really knows where Tarshish is, but people just.
But in the
assume
narrative, he's going the
he's
other.
going exactly the opposite direction. Yeah, and so and so I would say this is I learned the word for it. In Hebrew, we say tikkun, not a correction, a corrective maybe. This is kind of a literary biblical corrective. I think what Paul is doing in pushing this, and to my mind, all these details are in order to show that he was sent on a mission. That's why he's going to Rome, and that's why it doesn't. He just need. Well, we'll talk about that at the end, or maybe next week. But he didn't back away from that mission, as you mentioned beforehand, George. It wasn't the most common thing for all these Jewish folks to get in a boat and want to go someplace, right?
Huh.
But he accepts the mission, and he's the one, the driving force, as opposed to Jonah, who is bogging everybody down. Yeah, the throwing off of things, which, by the way, all this the truth is, this description is found in lots of ancient literature about seafaring people when the going gets rough, what you do. But it feels here and it would be interesting, which I'm not at that level, to compare the Greek here with the Greek with the Septuagint of Jonah, to also to see the amount of words that correspond.
Nice, yeah.
Well, they're getting rid of that which is not absolutely necessary, which is to say their cargo, so they're not going to make a profit on this thing, and the tackle, which is absolutely necessary to loading and unloading the cargo that they're just shoving overboard. They're trying to get out with their lives.
Right.
It sounds to me echoing of the experience of Christ in the storm on Galilee, where everybody else is thinking we got to do something here, and he's saying, "Well, ye of little faith."
Mhm. Mhm.
That's good.
Yeah. Yes, Rita Claire.
That's more or less what I was thinking throughout this whole paragraph, that it seems to me that they are putting themselves in danger with the thought in mind that somehow God was going to save them because they had a purpose. And did they really need to do this to prove a point?
Well, you'll have to give us the answer to your own question when we finish the 2 chapters. Okay, so shall we go ahead and
Well, I like to say that reminds me, sort of parenthetically, of the deal that Abraham has with God, that he's going to have a child that will be the line for generations. And the child doesn't come. And finally they think, well, let's try to work the angle around this. And they get Hagar involved. They're trying to play within the bounds of the whatever deal, whatever mission that they have, and trying to read the fine print that maybe we're not intended to get this, but let's see if we can try and change things. And of course, that's not the way that the mission is, the task, which is to get Paul to Rome. And of course, we see the downside in the next several chapters.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. It's kind of like the connection with Abraham, the insurmountable challenges, right? There's a mission. By the way, Abraham's mission is not just to be a great nation, which you mentioned, Hagar, and that challenge of not having children, but also to possess the land. You may remember that Sarai and Avram, they just get there, and like the next chapter, they have to leave because there's a famine in the land, and they go down to Egypt. You know, there's this constant. They're all moving, and the challenges of it, these insurmountable. And I would imagine we could find out, David in his life as well, with his struggles with Saul. We could probably find a number of other figures. In other words, so the bottom line here being, which we're going to leave for Rita Claire, to answer her own question, but a possible bottom line might be, this perseverance, this lesson of perseverance. But the detail here in this chapter, and we go on. There's even more detail going on. Well, why don't we? I'm rushing it along a little bit because we've got to finish to the end of the chapter in a short amount of time. So, Jim, you want to read, or Terry?
Sure. Since they had been without food for a long time, Paul then stood up among them and said, "Men, you should have listened to me and not have set sail from Crete, and thereby avoided this damage and loss. I urge
Listening in with the study with the rabbi.
Sorry, just a
So-
sec.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I urge you now to keep up your courage, for there will be no loss of life among you, but only of the ship. For last night there stood by me an angel of God, of the God to whom I belong and whom I worship. And he said, 'Do not be afraid, Paul. You must stand before the emperor. And indeed, God has granted safety to all those who are sailing with you. So keep up your courage, men, for I have faith that in God that it will be exactly as I have been told. But we will have to run aground on some island.'"
Okay, and your reactions. You usually have questions for these things. No questions today?
Well, just that whole business of, if you had listened to me, because Paul had a plan in the beginning, but he was a passenger and not a sailor and not in charge and had no money invested in this, especially since he was a prisoner. I can understand why they didn't listen to him, but it's a little bit, it really is like Jonah. He just happened to be riding on the ship, but he knew what was going on.
It's moving in a Hallmark card direction of the hero's journey, right? This is the hero's journey. And when you compare this Paul to Paul in, let's say, 2 Corinthians, where he despairs, I mean, he's so vulnerable and admits just his fear and his vulnerability. And here he's, the Superman. And so it's a contrast for sure that's highlighting Paul's heroic stature.
Holiday in his excellent commentary calls this, so you'll like this, Terry, an I told you so moment. I told you so.
Nobody likes being told, I told you so.
Yeah. So-
Rabbi,
Yeah.
this it kind of annoys me because what I see here is when he says the angel appeared to him and told him what's going to happen. It makes it seem to me like this is a almost like a Punch and Judy show where God is up pulling the strings. There's no choices. I mean, it's all preordained. And it kind of like doesn't matter what anyone does because it's all planned out like it's a group tour itinerary, and you'll know what's going to happen in the next chapter. They're all just puppets in a way.
So
At
it's
least
a
that's
issue,
what
it's
I
a
see.
question of freedom of choice, huh?
Well, that's this is called the Acts of the Apostles, but I would posit it's Acts of the Holy Spirit.
Hmm.
I mean, when he says an angel appeared before me and told me this is what's going to happen, and I'm imparting it to you, so you should listen to me because hey, this is the mover and the shaker that's in charge, and I have the inside scoop. But if that's so, then it means that I mean, it doesn't matter. I mean, you're all you have. It's not you who's deciding this. It's the wizard behind the curtain.
Yeah, I think that's a fair thought, Richard. For me, I just see it as part of the destiny. There's destiny going on here. The way Luke is telling this story, and Paul was destined to go to Rome and spread the gospel to all peoples everywhere. And of course, he ends it with a happy ending, not with Paul's ultimate martyrdom and death. But yeah, I hear what you're saying, but I'm holding that in tension with this is also about how again, the temple's destroyed. This is a couple of generations at least after the historical incident happened. So they're framing this story in a way to establish the church's foundation, to give confidence in the Pauline letters and in Paul himself. And so that's kind of how I hold that tension narratively.
Yeah, that tension is in the book of Jonah, of course, as well, right? God says to Jonah, go to Nineveh and tell them it's going to be destroyed in 40 days. And Jonah doesn't want to go because what seems to be the simple meaning of the text, not just rabbinic understanding, is that he doesn't want to be proven as a fool because he knows that if he tells them, they'll repent and then God will back. So Richard, it is and it isn't predestined. There's that tension going on. But yes, there is something of the fates. There's a rabbinic phrase that says, Ein mazal Yisrael. There is no mazal, like you say, mazel tov. You think everybody thinks it means congratulations. And mazal tov really means good stars. The mazalot are the astrology, the horoscope, the fate. Have good fate. And when the rabbis say that the Jewish people don't have faith, what they mean, don't have fate, what they mean is there is truth in the faith, things are predestined to happen, but the Jewish people, according to this very particularistic view, can change those fates by their behavior, by repentance. And I think that's in the background here as well. There's this tension between what was going to happen, that he was told by the angel, and him and his fulfilling his mission. I think, as I say, as a corrective to Jonah. There's another issue here that caught my attention, is that who does the saving, according to Paul?
Themselves.
No, look towards in the second to last line, or in verse 24.
Exactly.
Do not be afraid, Paul, you must stand before the emperor. Indeed, God has granted safety to all those who are standing with you. I would have expected Jesus. Maybe not. Is that an unrealistic expectation? Would this not have been a place to plug belief in?
Well, clearly, in his three accounts of his call, his conversion on the road to Damascus, it was the risen Jesus who was speaking. And so here yeah, I mean, that's a great question, David. I think Luke had made a decision there, for one reason or another.
Yeah, I got that book, by the way, you suggested a few weeks ago, how do we know when we're talking about God? How do we know we're talking about Jesus in New Testament literature? I forgot. I haven't got, of course, I haven't read it yet, but I've got it. Anyway, we could talk about it another time. Rita Claire, I think you wanted to say something, and then it was Terry or Jim who raised their hand. Just have to
Yes.
unmute first, Rita Claire.
Sorry about before. I forgot I was not muted.
We love hearing your intimate secrets.
Okay. I was thinking that if you believe in the Trinity, that God and Jesus are one, then you could assume that when he's speaking about having faith in God, that he's also putting faith in Jesus. Because
I'm
the
sure that's how people read it or read it. I would imagine.
Yeah, I think so too. And this angel, this messenger, angelos, who comes to Paul, I mean, that's a metaphorical way at the very least of saying Paul has this inner confidence. It's like, we're going to get there. Is it positive magical thinking, or is it just a conviction in his innermost being that we call faith? You know, I mean, I think that's the latter is what's being communicated.
You know what? Whatever the Bible is, or what it is not, it certainly is a text of psychology, how people think and what makes them think things. The Outward Bound, for instance, was created because there was such a high mortality of sailors. When they were shipwrecked, they just give up because they thought they were doomed, and why bother to try? But being told by somebody, God has come to me and he says, we're going to make it. And we're all going to be there. It's going to require leaving the ship. We're going to be shipwrecked, but we're all going to make it. If they believe that, if they have faith, then they will not give up. And they will fight for themselves. They will fight to survive because they're told they're going to survive. This is the problem that Moses had with the people when he went up to the mountain. He came back, everything had gone to hell because they didn't believe. Suddenly they're making graven images because they didn't have faith, and he's angry at them because they give up.
Jim, I think you want to add something.
First, just a response to Rita Claire and some of us, the idea that God and Jesus are one. So when we read it that way, God is part of the Trinity. But I'm thinking the Christian community didn't really come up with the concept of the Trinity until a couple of centuries later. So we may be reading it this way, but I'm not sure that's what Luke meant when he wrote it. Then I have a question. We keep talking about Paul's mission here, which I think we're saying his mission was to go and preach to Rome. But I wonder if that's sort of, okay, that was God's mission. Paul didn't necessarily know that yet. Paul's intent was to get to Rome to appeal to the emperor so he would be exonerated of these charges. So comments on that.
Well, just to go back to the calling, the interruption on his way to Damascus. Remember, the risen Jesus says, hey, Paul, get up. You know, I'm sending you on an assignment. You're going to take the Jewish covenant to the outsider, to the ethne, the nations. So that became his primary goal. And here he's going to the heart of the empire, finally, to testify, to bring that to fulfillment, that assignment.
Yeah, Jim, I was wondering the same thing, and I thought I thought that perhaps Paul has the intention to spread the word, but he's using the trial as an excuse. He's manipulating the system to get him there. Which is it may be an interesting lesson. When I take a step back from the Acts of the Apostles, as we're beginning to do now, and see, so what is this? What is this really about? What is this? And of course, I'm reflecting from myself as I do more than most, perhaps because I talk more than most of you here. But you know, the state of Israel, the redemption of the people of Israel in the 20th century, this yearning that we tell ourselves in the national anthem, the Hatikva, the hope, as if we've been waiting for 2,000 years for this, which is a construct, a political literary construct of the late 19th century of Zionist thinkers. There was always a healthy diaspora even before the destruction of the temple in 70. I'm wondering now how much of this, the post-destruction, post-Jesus life, now we've got to go out to the diaspora. How much of Judaism was actually influenced by what we read in the apostles here? This had to happen for the spread of the church. And so I'm thinking perhaps maybe it's being hinted at that Paul is manipulating the system for this very purpose. But I don't know, maybe it's as you say as well, that he had one intention, God had another intention for him.
Terry says that if he was manipulating the system, then he was really, really good, because not only did he manage to get to Rome so he could spread this, he also managed to get himself a free ride.
That's what I meant. Yeah, that's exactly. Yeah. He didn't have to pay for it. Exactly. Absolutely. Of course, there was no food to eat, as we just saw. This wasn't business class. All right. So why don't we?
Small portions.
Yeah. Richard, you want to read for us? 27.
When the 14th night had come, as we were drifting across the Adriatic Sea, about midnight, the sailors suspected that they were nearing land. So they took soundings and found 20 fathoms. A little farther, they took soundings again and found 15 fathoms. Fearing that we might run on the rocks, they let down 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for day to come. But when the sailors tried to escape from the ship and had lowered the boat into the sea on the pretext of putting out anchors from the bow, Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay in the ship, you cannot be saved." Then the soldiers cut away the ropes of the boat and set it adrift.
Any understandings here or lack thereof? It seems to me that Paul, in his manipulating of the people around him, we shouldn't use that word manipulating, it sounds negative, but his organizing, his organizing skills, wants to make sure they understand that they will only be saved with him on the boat and essentially in charge. He kind of, in this way, takes command of what's going to go on. This is his way of showing that what's happening now, the salvation, which is a metaphor for something greater, I think, is only going to happen if they stick with him on this boat. I don't know. What do you think, Steve?
It sounds kind of like the rats are abandoning the ship to me. If they get on the boat, they can say adios to everybody else and save themselves.
And so then what is Paul telling them?
They need the sailors on board to be able to manage the ship, because the soldiers don't know from Shinola about sailing.
Steve, oh, you're off. Okay. So let's move ahead, and I don't know if Steve is going to get something or a map or something, or okay. All right.
He's back.
Steve, do you want to add
Sorry
anything?
about that. Somebody rang the doorbell and the dogs were
okay.
crazy. I'm sorry, what did I miss?
No, the 14th night, this thing about making sure that soldiers, that everybody stays on board. And we're in this together, we've got to show. I don't know that the 14th night has any significance. I tried to think of it. I don't think it's 2 weeks. Does that mean anything? I don't know.
You know, what is it? Rabbi, it's not why I think this. I don't see anywhere in here where there's a justification for this change at the beginning. No one's listening to Paul at 27:1, and now we're at 27:27, and suddenly everybody's listening to him. What changed? I mean, if I have this Shmigegi on board here, I'm the captain of the ship, and who doesn't know? Somebody said Shinola doesn't know about sailing, and suddenly I'm listening to him telling me how to captain my ship. I would say, what do you know? You're not a captain. You're not a sailor. You don't know. Why am I listening to you? I want to go to the experts. Get me a PhD.
Again, I think we've seen over and over in the book of Acts that comparison or that implied correlation between Jesus and Jesus's response to the Roman authorities and persecution and Paul. So all of the resonances we've already referred to, whether it be Jonah or Odysseus or Jesus calming the storm, he's not a sailor, and his disciples, he's just asleep in the boat. They wake him up and say, hey man, we need you to bail. And he says, you don't have faith, and the wind still. So I think some of that is happening here as well. It's just validating that exousia, that inner authority that Paul has. And in the Gospel of John, the trial and execution of Jesus, it's a completely different portrayal than in Matthew, Mark, or Luke. In John, Jesus is shown to be the one in charge. He's the one making it happen. He's the one who causes the soldiers to bow down when they come to arrest him. And so it's an idealized portrait to make the case that the Holy Spirit, there's something greater than meets the eye going on here, and it's being validated. That's all I can come up with.
You mentioned John. I'm thinking in Matthew. The Jesus in Matthew, to my mind, is I'm in charge. You could say you could do whatever you want, but I'm the one. It's just kind of smiling. I imagine smiling from the corner of the room and watching these people do all the things that they're going to do, but knowing what's going to happen. This knowledge is a different form of control than saying I'm in control. But I don't know. Those were my impressions at the time. But so let's go on. 33. Eileen, would you like to read for us?
Just before daybreak, Paul urged all of them to take some food, saying, "Today is the 14th day that you have been in suspense and remaining without food, having eaten nothing. Therefore, I urge you to take some food, for it will help you survive. For none of you will lose a hair from your heads." After he had said this, he took bread, and giving thanks to God in the presence of all, he broke it and began to eat. Then all of them were encouraged and took food for themselves. We were in all 276 persons in the ship. After they had satisfied their hunger, they lightened the ship by throwing the wheat into the sea.
Okay. So let's hold off for a second. I'm guessing, Eileen,
That seems pretty foolish to be throwing the wheat into the sea. I mean, at this point in time.
Unless you're going to sink with the wheat on board.
True.
But let's ask perhaps some of our Christian colleagues here.
Yes.
Well, what comes out of this? How do you read this paragraph?
We have communion.
Yeah.
Cast the bread unto the waters.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of that connection, casting the grain. But I think what George has just mentioned, I think most Christians reading this would see this as a precursor of sorts, or whatever you call the opposite of precursor. On one hand, imitating Jesus and perhaps the Last Supper, maybe. I think there's a little bit of a debate about that in the history of interpretation. On one hand, and the other hand, a precursor for Eucharist.
Yeah, like verse 35 is precisely the fourfold action. You take, you bless, you break, and you give and eat. And that it's all there in that one verse.
Mhm. Right, but so there, I don't think there's any doubt about the effect that this paragraph has had on the Eucharist. But the question is this going back? Is this the same? Is this the same idea as the Last Supper in the same way? I don't know.
Well, of course, and it's all we know the story. It's all prefatory to the general baptism of everyone as they get into the sea as the ship founders.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Yeah, that's a form of forced baptism, right? Drowning. And of course, what's the point that Steve has been making since our very first meeting together? Right, these koinoneo, this of being together, even in this moment of utmost danger, they're breaking bread together as a community. These hundreds of people.
Yeah, I appreciate your saying that, David. I think at the very least, we're given a model of one who of what faith looks like in action. There's no reaction, there's no fear, you go with the givens, you go a day at a time, the daily bread, you respond out of a sense of faith and the community that inspires that or benefits by it.
I'm struck by the number 276. This has got to be an enormous ship for the period to hold that many people.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it does seem like a lot, and it surprises us because I don't think we thought of until this moment. I don't think any of us. To me, I was surprised. Right? You're mentioning this now, but because the point is to show that the food was, I think how many people were in communion together. I don't know. Corinne, you want to read the next section? Are you up to reading today?
Yes. Which part is it, please?
We're in 39, verse 39. Chapter
Yes.
27. Yeah.
One sec.
Top of the second
Oops.
page.
Right. In the morning, they did not recognize the land, but they noticed a bay with a beach on which they planned to run the ship ashore, if they could. So they cast off the anchors and left them in the sea. At the same time, they loosened the ropes that tied the steering oars, then hoisting the foresail to the wind. They made for the beach, but striking a reef, they ran the ship aground. The bow stuck and remained immovable, but the stern was being broken up by the force of the waves. The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that none might swim away and escape. But the centurion, wishing to save Paul, kept them from carrying out the plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and make for the land, and the rest to follow, some on planks and others in pieces of the ship. And so it was that all were brought safely to land.
So this sounds like the origin story of the settlement on Mauritius. I'm joking.
It was many people.
Right. For those that don't know, Corinne lives off the coast of Africa. Yeah, this is quite a tale, I think. But who comes to the rescue? It seems to be that Paul's best friends in the Roman world are centurions. It doesn't matter which one, but somebody who has the title of centurion. What do you think, Steve? Maybe wind us up, because of course we have this expression in Yiddish. It probably exists in other languages as well. It says that a person will make plans and God will laugh, and it rhymes. And that's actually the story we're reading here. But of course, the plan was to do 2 full chapters today. And there, God is laughing at us, thinking, really, you thought you were going to do it that quickly? Steve, you want to wind us up maybe, and just set us in the right direction of how to escape the ship to dry land for next week?
Yeah, again, this recalls the Philippian jailer who was about to kill himself, and Paul says, no, we're still here. After the earthquake opened and they escaped from their cell. And so again, they're highlighting, accenting a way of being in the world that constitutes the gospel in whatever way we want to interpret that. We're given a picture of it here in action. And again, it's that conflict that Richard brought up between the purpose and our response, our agency in that community. So there's freedom to say yes and participate, but it's the community itself, the koinonia, that is the thing itself. And so the goal is to get to Rome. And then if you look at 28 verse 1, David, I don't know if you want me to just zoom ahead, but to summarize, they're on Malta. Paul is gathering wood. Again, Paul's the Boy Scout. He's the leader. He's taking care. He's the pastor. He's the good shepherd. He's making a fire, and then a viper bites him, a poisonous viper. And this culture, and in all cultures, there's relative superstitions. And the fact that Paul didn't die suggests that Paul is no longer giving power to the daimons or the magical powers. As we saw earlier in the book of Acts, he casts out that spirit, that girl, that fortune teller who is being used by her owners. And so we see this drift towards a different kind of being in the world. And long story short, they land in Italy, and lo and behold, Paul is nervous, as we know from the end of his book, his letter to the Roman church. He was nervous that they would reject him because of his relationship between the law and the gospel, his liberality regarding circumcision. And he knew the church at Rome was a little more conservative, but lo and behold, they come out to meet him. They welcome him. The koinonia is intact. It's preserved. Jew and Gentile have found a way to be together in the same vine, and yet we have this ending where it said, while some were convinced, others are still questioning, and then Paul pulls out this statement from Isaiah, which Jesus also used in talking about his parables. You may hear but not understand. You may see but not really perceive. And so it returns to this need of humility of the heart, this openness to the other, for the koinonia to work, to have the communion with plurality and not be reduced into religious ideological factions. But it ends by kind of furthering that polarization, where it says, verse 28, let it be known to you then that this salvation of God has been sent to the Gentiles. That was Paul's assignment from the beginning. You remember, they will listen. If you read the letter of Romans, especially chapters 9, 10, and 11, you'll get a very different, more nuanced understanding of what I think is being overly generalized here at the end of Luke. But and then it ends, he lived there 2 whole years at his own expense, and welcomed all who came to him, proclaiming the kingdom of God, teaching about the Lord Jesus Christ with all boldness and without hindrance. The message is welcome to all. Some hear it and respond, others don't. So that's all I got. And it's
So
one
then,
of
so then the question is, do we actually read this verse by verse next week together and try to do that quickly and leave some time for
I
reflection?
think that would be useful,
I think
David.
so as well, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
It'll give us that segue into then our conversation.
great. Okay, then. So thanks for being here and look forward to seeing you all next week as well.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Peace.